Hello, all, and welcome to the Movie Bears podcast. I'm Brad Harris, and each week I'm joined by some of my favorite husky, hairy, huggable homos to review films, either current or classic. And this week definitely will be a current film. We're going to be reviewing Deadpool 2, the follow-up to the hard R-rated superhero movie that came out a while back. Excited to talk about this movie with those huggable hairy homos I mentioned. Let me introduce them to you. Jim Pugliaffico is here with us. Hey, babe, welcome to the show.
Thanks, babe. Thanks. And welcome to the podcast, everyone. Looking forward to this one.
Will Lindis is here too, of course. Welcome, Will.
Hey there, Brad and Jim, and guest who will be announcing in a moment. I hope you guys brought your chimichangas because I am freaking hungry.
Indeed. And we do have a very special guest with us this week. You may recognize him from previous episodes of our show, but if you listen to the Comic Book Bears podcast, you'll definitely recognize him by the sound of his sultry voice and those smoldering good looks. Bill Zanowitz, welcome to the show. How you doing?
How you doing, Brad? Hey, Jim. Hey, Will. Hey, everybody. Really, really thrilled to be back on the show here.
We're glad you could join us. And glad to have you back. We don't get to talk to you that often. We see you a little bit on Facebook. That's about it. One of these days, our paths are going to cross. Like
someday. It was just so frustrating that while you were going to New York, I was going to Chicago that one time late last year. But at some point, it'll work out. And I did make a sort of cameo last week, though.
You did.
Yes.
You made a pretty hot cameo.
That's right.
Yeah. Had me blushing like you wouldn't believe when you got me.
You had us blushing. So turnabout is fair play, my friend.
Okay.
We may have needed cold showers mid-show. We had
Yeah, for those of you wondering what he's talking about, who weren't listening or watching the show last week, go back and check out the YouTube podcast, our broadcast of that show. Bill was one of our Bears of Summer last week, our featured Bears of Summer, which was really hot.
Oh yeah, it was so hot, in fact, Bill, that I really feel like we need to see it again. So for anyone who may have missed it last week, here is Bill Zanowitz with his sultry Bear of Summer look.
This is the show objectifying Bill, and I'm
in my July glory there. Yeah.
Oh man, so freaking hot. Well,
Bill, I think we're already driving some of our chat friends a little crazy. If you know what I mean.
Oh man. Well, speaking of our chat friends, we would be remiss if we didn't say hello to everyone who's hanging out with us live tonight. We got a bunch of people with us already. Looks like we've got Chris Lopez, the sexy, sometimes voice of the Movie Bears podcast, with us in the live chat tonight. Hey, Chris. Glad to have you with us. We've also got a new fan of the show, Jordan Riley, who we met over the weekend. We went to Denver for the wedding of our friends Sam and Steve. Sammy W., who is often on the live chat as well. Jordan, good to see you. He might. We'll see. I mean, they're kind of recovering from a weekend of like wedding craziness. So, maybe they're taking some quiet time for themselves, but maybe I'll listen at some point. But Jordan, glad to have you with us. Welcome as well to all of those people who are listening via the magic of digital tape delay too. We know not everyone can listen live, so we're glad to have you guys. If you are listening 3 days from now, 3 years from now, whenever that is, welcome to the show to you. Guys, we got a lot to talk about tonight. Deadpool 2. Holy crap. Are we ready to do it? Is it time to jump on in?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's nail this.
Why not? Let's talk about this X guy, whatever he is.
All right. Well, for those of you who may be new to the show, what we like to do is talk about the film as spoiler-free as possible before giving you fair warning. Jim, you're laughing. Why are you laughing?
we got Jordan in the chat. Keeps asking, who is the silver bear? Who is the sexy gray beard bear?
We'll
Jordan,
be revealing his secret identity during our third act twist.
Jordan, you may have popped in after we gave the initial interview, but Bill's so hot, I'm going to focus the camera on him. Aw, look at that smiling face.
Oh my God.
That
I'm not red
Bill,
enough already. God already.
That is Bill Zanowitz from the Comic Book Bears podcast, Jordan. If you like comic books, by the way, you should definitely check out their show as well. It's one of my favorite podcasts. I don't always read the books you're talking about, but I do love to listen, Bill. So
cool.
Anyone else, definitely check that show out.
Yeah, I don't know if Jordan likes comic books. He might, but I do know that he likes Bill.
There's several reasons to listen. There's the comic book side. There's the bears. If you like comic book bears, you've got different things for wherever you land in that cross section.
I think Jordan would like to land in this cross section.
Oh my God.
In any event, we could keep making these fun bantery jokes all night because they're a blast. But I know a lot of people are waiting for the Deadpool goodness, so we're gonna jump into it. Don't worry, we'll give you fair warning before we open up the can of spoilers. So if for some reason you're listening, you haven't seen the film yet, we will protect your virginal innocence as much as we can, and then we'll give you that warning so that you can step away for a little while, come back for plugs at the end. But guys, it is time to rip off the Band-Aid. Here we go, our discussion of Deadpool 2. Is this movie called Deadpool 2 more Deadpool-y? Because I kind of feel like it should be, maybe, question mark?
Deadpool 2 waiting in.
Yeah.
Thank
I
you,
don't know if they couldn't find maybe with all the one-liners in the movie, you think they would have come up with like a one-liner like subtitle for this movie, They have for the other ones.
Yeah, Deadpool 2 Electric Boogaloo.
Yeah,
or something. It doesn't roll off the tongue as well.
Deadpool 2 dull cream cheese spreader, whatever.
Deadpoolier. There we go.
Yeah.
So we were big fans of the first movie. You may have listened to the show way back when the first movie came out. That was a couple of years ago, I think, at this point, casting my mind back in time. Of course, we're excited to talk about the sequel. And Will, if you don't mind, maybe kick us off a little bit. I mean, I think most people are familiar with the premise, Deadpool, who he is. But what's the setup of this film's plot? Was this worth checking out in movies? Should people wait? Skip, what do you think?
Yeah, so 2016, we got Ryan Reynolds bringing us the first of the Deadpool movies, which was a passion project for him. This was a film that was not going to be made until he put himself out there in such a way that the fans demanded it, and Fox said, you know what, okay, fine, we'll give you a little bit of money, we'll let you make this movie. And holy crap, it made so much money that they couldn't help but make a sequel, Deadpool 2, with a bigger budget, bigger cast, and just sort of put out probably the way that the first one should have been, at least in terms of like budget and marketing. So here we are with Deadpool 2. IMDb description says, foul-mouthed mutant mercenary Wade Wilson, aka Deadpool, brings together a team of fellow mutant rogues to protect a young boy with supernatural abilities from the brutal, time-traveling cyborg, Cable. There are some factual issues in that description, but I think it's sound enough for our purposes here. So this is, in terms of plot, like this is a lot like Deadpool 1, just more of it, right? This is a movie that is all about pushing the boundaries of that hard R. Deadpool as a character is essentially Bugs Bunny. He's allowed to just sort of like run around the screen doing meta fourth wall breaking jokes, having the equivalent of an anvil dropped on his head and then bouncing back up, all while doing butt, fart, and fuck you jokes at the audience and at the the superhero genre as a whole. And I think with this particular movie, it's a comedy. Ultimately it's a comedy, and the measure of success on whether a comedy is successful or not is, does it make you laugh? And I think by and large this movie is successful. Compared to the first one, it has a lot more tonal shifting. When it goes really wacky, it goes really wacky, but then it'll make some hard turns into like serious territory, and you'll be sitting there waiting for the punchline to show up. They're like, okay, no, this is a serious moment. And then a few moments later, you'll be like, okay, now we're in the serious moment, and oh, okay, now there's a joke. And it wasn't always gracefully done. That would be one of my largest criticisms of the film. I feel like when they did land some of the serious moments, and I think quite well, and they did land some of the jokes quite well, but just the way they wove in and out of those wasn't always successful for me. But hey, I had fun with this. I enjoyed the cast quite a bit. This is the role that Ryan Reynolds was basically born to play. You have a few returning characters here, like Marina Baccarin, Firefly, I love her, comes back as Vanessa. You have Brianna Hildebrandt back as Negasonic Teenage Warhead. You've got Fuck TJ Miller back in this one. Josh Brolin shows up for the first time in this as Cable himself. We saw him in Thanos recently, so pretty interesting to see him kicking ass in a few different superhero films. And I know we're big fans of Julian Dennison. We saw him in Hunt for the Wilder People. We get to see him again here as Rusty, the reincarnation of one of my low-key favorite comic book characters, and we'll maybe talk about that a little bit later on. Why? Because it's a stupid pick on my point, on my part. But the thing that I have to call attention to is Zazie Beetz as Domino. You could almost just make this a Domino movie for me, and I'd have been there for it. Like, I think anytime she was on screen, she absolutely stole the show for me. I want to see more of this character. I want to see more of this actress. So, yeah, I mean, if Deadpool 3 is just called, like, all Domino all the time, I'm here for it.
Luck is not a superpower, Will.
I'll prove you wrong. I'll prove you wrong by showing you an hour and 59 minutes of glorious luck-based cinematic superpower.
Oh, goodness. Well, sounds like a win for Will. Babe, how about you?
Man, this movie's fine. I don't think I'm its target audience. First of all, there's a lot of reference humor here to the comics, to X-Men. Of course, I've seen the X-Men movies, but I never read the comics. So I don't know all the lore. I don't really know all the relationships. And I think this movie leans on that pretty heavily. And so some of the stuff, some of the humor, some of the in-humor probably didn't land quite right with me. I still got a few chuckles out of this movie. I didn't care much at all for the story in this movie. What I liked about this movie was I really liked, we have the second Josh Brolin performance in a couple months, right? In a comic book movie. So maybe we could talk about that a little bit more. Like, how does Cable relate to Thanos? Are they two different universes? Like, am I supposed to be confused by this, or did they come together at some point? And we could talk about that. But I did like Josh Brolin as Cable in this movie. I liked the character, and that's with not knowing anything about Cable. I just liked that he kind of grounded the movie in a way. I thought, because you have Deadpool on this side doing all his like crazy, like pushing the envelope kind of stuff, jumping around, like you said, Will, like Bugs Bunny. And here you got this kind of grounded anti-hero, I guess you could say, kind of driving a lot of the plot of the movie, or whatever plot there was in the movie. There wasn't really a lot. We'll talk about the subplots and spoilers, but it worked fine. I think fans of I've seen the comments, and I think fans of Marvel movies and fans of the comics are mostly going to like this movie. Like you said, Will, it's more of the same. They kind of pushed it a little harder in this movie, I thought, with the violence humor, the gross out stuff, of course the F-bombs. If you did an F-bomb count, somebody must have done it online. This movie, I think, had more. It's okay. I'm not the target audience. I think this is a fine movie. I think people are going to enjoy the hell out of this movie. It doesn't have enough story or like character work for me, but I think it's fine.
All right, it was fine.
Yeah.
Some good points, Jim. I'm
anxious I could tear into it as a film, like talk about story and plot threads that just got dropped like halfway through. But I think that's all at the expense of yucks and shock violence.
Maybe so. All right,
I'll shut up.
All right, Bill. Let's hear from you, especially given that you are representing the Comic Book Bears podcast and you have a large depth of knowledge here. What did you think of this film?
I think it falls in the liked but not loved category for me for a lot of the reasons that Jim and Will cited. I think it's basically an anarchy machine that can run on automatic at this point already after one film. And when you have a situation like that, there's going to be a lot of things that are derivative. I felt it was so intent on making you laugh every 3 minutes that there were points where there was a level of excessiveness that you never really got with the first film. The first film's like a remarkably balanced film. And I think the test of a popcorn film like this is if you go away and think, God, I want to see that again. I didn't have that with this. There were parts I thought were wonderful. I think it's a remarkably well cast film. But some of the areas where I think there were failings or things that you guys had hit upon, especially with Jim. This was something I wasn't even thinking of. That there are like in nudge references that must soar over some people's heads, and I'm sure we can talk about that in spoilers a little bit. And I also think it's a bad sign for the quality of a film where, and we'll talk about this in spoilers as well, when the after credits sequence is the best part of the film.
Sure. Yes.
And to me, that says something could have been bolstered somewhere along the line. You shouldn't be able to say that about any film. So I mean, it's. I don't want to come down on the side of saying not go see it. It's a delightfully funny film. But I think it just relished in knowing it was a delightfully funny film a little bit too much.
Now, Bill, given your depth of knowledge and experience with comics, do you feel like this tone is pretty in key with the comics, though, or is it kind of a different?
It's in key with the Deadpool comics. It's not necessarily in key with some of the other source material that you saw within the film, particularly the coming together of X-Force. That's a wildly different tone in those books. But certainly with how they've treated Deadpool since, at this point, like 20 years with the breaking the fourth wall and all that, it certainly is in line with a particular type of Deadpool comic, not necessarily the ones that gathered the source material for this one, though.
Okay. That was kind of something I had wondered a little bit about the X-Force factor. Can I use that word? Is an X factor thing too?
Don't call it the X factor because that's a completely different.
No, I'm not calling it X factor. I just said the X-Force factor, and then I started to confuse myself a lot. But yeah, no, that definitely makes sense, and I'm anxious to get into that. I think for me, you guys have kind of said everything that I would say anyway. I loved the first movie. I thought the first movie was phenomenal. I liked this movie a lot, but I felt like it took the stuff that was like kind of on point from the first film, like some of the wink, wink, nudge, nudge stuff that was great, and just like magnified it by like, I don't know, 10 to 20. And I feel like in a lot of ways, it kind of became distracting in this film. And Jim, you had mentioned kind of the thinness of some of the plot already. There's a couple points in the film where I'm like, wait, what are they doing again? Wait, why are we here?
Yes,
wait,
absolutely.
What is this character about? Oh, but we got the wink, wink, nudge, nudge joke. All right, we're good again, right? So, Bill, you had mentioned sort of that like great balance that they struck, and I felt like I don't know. Maybe they were trying to go a little too hard on some of that stuff here, like make it more Deadpoolier as opposed to a balanced Deadpool film. But I think it's kind of hard to talk around some of this stuff without going into spoilers. So I would say it's probably a logical time perhaps to do that. Although I do recognize we have at least one person I know of in the live chat who hasn't seen the movie yet. So guys, if we're ready for spoilers, those who haven't seen it yet can step aside, maybe come on back. Do you think we're there? Are we good to go?
I think we're there, but I also think if people are worried about spoilers, we're not talking about the crying game. I mean, I think if they listen in, they'll still get a decent impact from the film, and spoilers be damned.
Absolutely, not all spoilers are created equal. There are some films that, oh my gosh, the ending of The Sixth Sense, versus the ending of like a subversive superhero movie, but there are definitely some plot elements that people might want to keep unsullied. So I hope this was enough rambling on our part to give those people time to log off.
Well,
to come back.
I mean, if it's not a big deal, let's just talk about it. So when Cable turns into Thanos and we find out that Deadpool had one of the Infinity Stones all along. No.
Did I fall asleep for that?
Probably. It was a superhero movie.
See, that would have been clever. That would have been clever with when he opened up with Blind Al and you had an Infinity Stone. I thought that would have been really clever.
Why didn't they do that as a stinger?
They did one of the Infinity Stones in a different franchise.
Oh my god. Like Deadpool's just eating a chimichanga on a bridge and he bites into something hard and he's like, fuck, what's this? And he pulls it out and it's a glowing Infinity Stone.
Throws it over his shoulder.
Whoop. Like a lightsaber.
Like a lightsaber.
In a Ryan Johnson Star Wars movie.
Yep, which would be one of the. Oh, we won't revisit that.
All right. Well, listen, we've given you plenty of time to step away. If you're listening live, mute us. Come on back in 40 minutes or so. If you're listening,
you can mute us and just watch The Handsome, right?
You could do that too. You absolutely could do that. That's true. It's funny. Like, there's been like 3 people already who are like, "You guys should take your clothes off." And we kind of did that last episode.
You should have logged in last week.
Right?
It's on YouTube.
You can't do it every week because then it would become like old hat. Like
it would lose its power, right?
Yeah.
But here's the good news. If you want to see us all, including Bill, without clothes on, just go to youtube.com, search for Movie Bears Podcast, watch last week's episode, Bears of Summer. You can not only see us without our clothes on, you can see 10 other bears who submitted photos for our contest. So there you go. But it is time. All right, we're doing it. Spoilers are officially fair game. Bill Zanowitz, as a special guest of the Movie Bears Podcast, you get the honor. Where do you want to start first from a spoilers perspective?
I want to start at the end. Honestly, I think when we talked about a post-credit sequence, which was I was laughing so hard when you hit the sequence from the addressing that abysmal appearance of Deadpool in X-Men Origins Wolverine.
Oh, God.
Up until Ryan Reynolds' appearance in a franchise or an intended franchise, let's say, involving another comic book company, and actually something that was pretty sweet in terms of, which is a spoiler I don't really want to throw out, but a big conflict that exists at the beginning of the film is resolved in a very tongue-in-cheek way at the end. Like I said, it's like that's to me is a sign of something that fell south somewhere. I know when this film was initially planned, it was initially planned with the first film's director, Tim Miller, and he had creative differences with Ryan Reynolds. It should also be noted, Ryan Reynolds, apart from co-producing this, he's also one of the screenwriters.
Right.
Big force behind this.
Very big force behind this, and he certainly has an affection for the character. He certainly has an understanding of the character that cannot be disputed. I am certain some of the movie's funniest moments were ad-libbed, but I understand that Miller's exit from the film was that he wanted to do something different and not repeat themselves with the first film. And after seeing Deadpool 2, maybe his way was the way to go. I think this is a franchise that can sustain itself again and again. There's nothing wrong with some degree of repetition. If I ruled the universe, there would be a Kingsman movie every year, and there would be a Red movie every year, and the current installment probably wouldn't be too different from the previous one, and no one would care. For some reason with this, I think because the first film was so novel that I think that's where my level of disappointment came in. And also just thinking of the marketing of this film. I mean, the fake DVD covers that they were issuing with Office Space and stuff, you don't get that level of cleverness in the film.
No.
And I think that's something that would have benefited, that really would have benefited the film if you did have. I would really like to see what the outtakes were for this, because I'm sure there was shit that they threw against the wall that didn't stick, or it stuck for some people and didn't stick for others. And I bet there's some gems with that outtake footage. But I do think, and you can't even call it a safe bet, but like playing it safe, because it's not a safe construct. But I was just very disappointed in the sense that I felt that there was a way that they could have equaled the first film.
And I think the weird thing is that the elements that worked so well about the first one, and I would say worked so well about this one, were the comedic elements, which was probably the stuff that like Ryan Reynolds had the heaviest hand on, right? And I think the stuff that does start to fall apart are the connective narrative pieces that kind of pull the set pieces along. Because I think almost any one of the set pieces by itself in a vacuum is fine. But when you look at the whole film, kind of from start to finish, there are sequences, especially in Act 2, that have nothing to do with the setup or the payoff. They're just sort of like a side adventure set of things that are happening for the sake of the comedy. And my thought on this is like, you could go a completely different direction narratively, but still have the same type of humor that we see in this movie in that other narrative structure, and I think you'd have a better film for it. Now, one thing that I think was incredibly successful, not just because of the actor, but because of what they did with the character, was I kind of like what they did with Cable here. And the reason I like that is because this is a character who is way more popular than he has any right to be. He is a character with a convoluted, awful backstory in the comics who really epitomizes, like, there was this thing in the mid-90s in comic books where people would show up like grim and gruff and kind of grimdark with big guns and pouches on top of those guns. And they had this, like, that was like an aesthetic, and it was more about the aesthetic than the character behind him. And Cable is one of the most representative characters of that era. Deadpool too, but they've since fixed him with the fourth wall and the joking. But he used to be kind of like, you know, kind of a hardcore like hack and slasher, and that was it. But they haven't done a great job of fixing Cable subsequently in the comics. This is a character who is always going to be mired in this crazy backstory stuff. And
it's a character that's been around for 30 years, and to this day, I can't tell you what his powers are.
Right, because they changed so dramatically. But what works so well about him here is he's not just here to be the straight man for Deadpool. Because I think that's, even in the Cable and Deadpool comics, that's kind of what the role he plays.
Yes, absolutely.
Instead, we get this moral dilemma between the two of them, whether you save the boy or whether you kill the boy, and which is better. And you end up, because of that, you sort of have this mentality of, I think Cable is probably intellectually right, but morally wrong. Whereas you can look at Deadpool's decisions through this and saying, like, this is a dude that is actively trying to make the right decision, but has no idea how to do it, especially when he lives his life as a fuck up who constantly makes bad decisions. And all of that together, I thought, was one of the most compelling relationships and struggles of the film. It's just that it took us a while to get there, and you had so much extra baggage before you got those characters actually having dialogue with each other for it to be as compelling as it could have been. But there was something there that I quite enjoyed.
Yeah,
I would agree.
as I said, Cable was probably my favorite part of this. But Bill, back to something you were saying. How I mean, this movie, unlike unlike the Guardians of the Galaxy, I think has the balance right between like running the comedy part and also telling the story. I think they do a much better job there. This movie pushes the comedy and the irreverence and the pop culture references and stuff to the max, where I think it throws the scales way off and the story suffers. And we've all said the same thing. But maybe they didn't go far enough. Maybe it should be things I'd like to see are like, I'd like to see like a Deadpool like Valentine's Day special. I think that would be like awesome, right? Instead of Michael Bolton doing a Valentine's Day special, let's do a Deadpool one. Or like when they had the scene in the movie where he and is it the TJ Miller character are like interviewing potential superheroes like for like auditioning. I could have seen a little bit more of that. I thought that was pretty funny, a pretty funny part of the movie. It was strange how that whole X-Force, is it X-Force?
X-Force here, yeah.
X-Force thing came together and then just fell apart, like except for one character. It was kind of weird.
Couldn't he have extended that joke? Like, you know, if you're going to have, like, there were like, what, 5 people that auditioned and all 5 of them got the part? What if you had extended that and also had like 2 or 3, like, you know, no, you didn't get it. Like, maybe that's a great place to, I don't know if he said no, but have Hugh Jackman walk in and say, is there a spot for me? And just like, get the fuck out of here. This is my movie, Logan, or something like that. There's ways that you could have like done that instead of just saying, here's literally the cast. That's what Suicide Squad did. And that's one of the problems with Suicide Squad.
You know, speaking of like bringing in like Wolverine, for instance, right? One of our folks in the live chat, Jordan, had a question earlier that he saved for spoilers. Now seems like a good time. He's just, why didn't the main X-Men help Deadpool fight Juggernaut at the end, since Juggernaut is like one of the main villains of the X-Men? Can we just assume they were doing more important stuff? Question mark. What do you guys think?
Sure.
Yeah. And is Juggernaut
they're on a picnic?
Is Juggernaut the bucket head guy at the end? Is
that with the fuzzy ass? Yeah, that was him.
Bucket head. So where did like he came out of what was he like?
He is an X-Men villain. He's known for being the stepbrother of Charles Xavier, which is weird because I don't know that that's canon at this point because of the Professor X that we've seen in the comics hasn't really shown us a Kane Marco Juggernaut brother, but that's where he comes from. He's a major X-Men villain. We did see him in X-Men 3, but he was in a very, very different role. He's the one that came busting through the wall going, I'm the Juggernaut, bitch. And that's the only thing you remember about him from that movie.
Like the Kool-Aid man.
Yeah.
So see, this is why we need a civilian.
I forget. Remind me in this movie, how did Juggernaut just appear like out of the ground, or I forget where he.
Yeah, they pulled him up like a carrot, babe.
No, I'm seriously like what?
No, he was in the Supermax or whatever
the vehicle.
The Max. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we've seen him before, like in the prison cell, like he was the big.
That's right. He was the monster in the cell. That's right.
Monster. Yeah.
And that musical cue they had was hysterical. I will give the film that. With the classical choir, oh, holy fucking shit!
But the musical cue again, back to the stinger. I know we're jumping all over the place.
Yeah,
back to the stinger with the Cher. If I could turn back time, I thought that was pretty awesome too.
Okay, so I do have a question about that because I agree. The stinger was the best part of the whole movie. Could have just saw the stinger; I'd have been great, but. Are we to assume that he really did go back in time and save the life of his girlfriend since it happened after the movie like officially ended?
Director
because it's an X-Men film.
Okay.
Of course.
Gotcha. Okay. I figured, but like I wanted to be sure. So
yeah. They can do it any way they want it. Dream sequence, like whatever, magic Cher song, whatever they want to do, like flip it around.
And it's like I did walk out of it with like slightly mixed feelings on that point, because in some ways it's cheap, but on another hand, it's like, it's that thing we always yell at the screen. You have this thing, you have this problem. Why don't you use this thing to fix this problem? See every Harry Potter movie after the time turner. So like, I don't mind that it was here. I don't mind that they did it. And I think that they can probably just, like in Deadpool 3, just kind of watch past it, because I don't think this is the type of movie that needs to like sit in that pocket for too long.
Yeah.
But it is very weird to have like a major plot element happen mid-credits. Like that's one of the most significant things to happen in the film.
Yeah.
And it happened post-credits.
Well, part of it maybe because the first movie was all about like saving her and making sure she lived, and so maybe they didn't want to hit that note too much. I don't know, so just stuffed it in the stinger. But that had me like reevaluating the whole timeline at that point. Like I was like, well, wait a second, if she didn't die, like what about, you know? And so I'm like, did anything that happened in the movie change as a result of the changes to the timeline? It's a stinger. I'm thinking about it too hard, I guess.
Yeah, I guess you can't think about these things, Dave. You just gotta enjoy them for what they are. So Ryan Reynolds played Deadpool in Wolfman Wolverine Origins, right?
Yeah.
He was also the other version of Deadpool. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
But
really
they're not connected, right? Those two characters are not, at least in the movies, they're not really connected.
It's not the same character. I mean, it's the same character. It's Deadpool. Yeah. But one of the things that they started doing with the X-Men movies was, which one? Days of Future Past. They did all of that time travel to like reset the timelines, because they made the X-Men, the Wolverine Origins movie, and then they also made X-Men 3, and both of those were kind of dumpster fire films. And the movie, the franchise knew that they needed to try to fix that continuity before they could move forward with it. So all of that time travel in Days of Future Past is assumed to have fixed some of those things, which includes like throwing that shitty version of Deadpool with the sewn up mouth out the window because we have another Deadpool.
And I just loved how many gunshots he got.
Yeah.
That was the best part.
And he was shooting him in the ass.
Yes.
I have a question on the Deadpool's superpower or power is like a healing. He has a healing thing.
Yeah. Kind of like Logan or Wolverine. Yeah.
Okay, but he's not bulletproof. He just heals fast. Is that right?
Heals super fast.
So at the end, he took a bullet, right? And he was dying because he had the
power dampener,
the power dampener necklace on. Thank you, Brad, for explaining that to me.
No worries.
But and then it seemed like right after it, they took the thing off. Yes, didn't they take it off of him? Didn't they figure out how to get it off him? Or the
so what they ended up doing to reverse all of that, it didn't have to do with taking the collar off. It had to do with Cable had one charge of his slider left. And so what he did was he went back and he put the token in Wade's pocket. So he didn't try to like take the collar off to let his powers kick in. Deadpool had asked to die, so they let him die.
Yeah.
But he went back in time and recreated it to where instead of taking the wound, it hit the token.
Well, but I thought at one point before they undid everything, there was like a scene where they figured out the code or something, and they punched in a code and they took it off of him. Maybe
they took it off earlier in the movie.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe I'm getting my timeline mixed up, but I thought that maybe they had a chance to save him by taking it off, even after he was shot. You know what I mean?
But dying. He didn't want to be saved. Was the thing? Yeah. He wanted to die
with his girlfriend, right? Yeah. He wanted to be with his girlfriend
while the Academy was watching. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I have to say, I know it's cheesy as fuck, but it still worked for me. The whole like your heart has to be in the right place. And what that actually meant was he literally had to like take a bullet in the heart for this fucking kid. Like that shouldn't have like that is cheesy as hell. And I was still just like, when that happened, just kind of like, you go, Wade. Yeah, did it. Yeah. And so some of those elements worked, and it worked. Part of it worked because I really liked really liked the kid. What's his name again?
Oh yeah.
Julian Dennison, the one who played Russell. So I'm glad this hasn't happened yet. I'm so glad this hasn't happened yet, but he is actually a super, like, the character that he's based off is like this really like kind of inconsequential character from like the X Factor / New Mutant days named Rusty, and he's this like super white kind of redheaded dude. And I was waiting for all of the social justice warrior, they had to make him not white in this movie, and none of that happened, fortunately, or at least not in front of me, and that made me so happy because I thought this was a great way to take a character who, yeah, I liked in the comics quite a bit, but would never want to see in the movies because there's just not enough there. They did something with him to where it's like, yeah, he totally works, and the changes they made to him made a lot of sense here. So I'm so glad this film hasn't had that controversy tied to it.
Well, it's one of those things where, you know, we saw Ricky in Hunt for the Wilder People having these like temper tantrums, and we knew he was going to manifest his powers at some point, and we finally got it in this movie. So I'm glad we got to see that arc closed.
Yeah. I don't know. I had a little bit of an issue with Dennison in this one. I think the kid's got acting chops. I think his fit in Hunt for the Wilder People was much better than the fit here. He seemed to be forcing a lot of stuff here. I don't know if he was really believable as like a kid struggling with superpowers as much as he was believable as a kid, you know, like a troubled, orphan kid, adopted kid, like out in the wilderness and in the New Zealand outback or whatever. But yeah, I mean, he was all right. It seemed a little, it wasn't a perfect home run for me.
I bought it a little more because I think that this was a character who is filled with a ton of rage. And the more we found out about that character and just some of the atrocities that had been committed upon him at the orphanage, I think like all of his rage was fairly justified, to the point where like, and I think this is one of the things that the X-Men movies, I wish the X-Men movies spent more time dealing with this type of thing, because we see that sometimes in the comics, like the God Loves, Man Kills type storylines, where you deal with like just the atrocities that man commits to mutants, especially in the name of religion or whatever. We got to see that here, and we got to see it being presented in such a way that like there were moments where I'm just like, you know what, if Russell like wastes this guy, I don't know that I'm necessarily, I know it changes the future, makes him a supervillain and damns everything, but at the same time, like, dude has it coming. And that's the thing I think is again, in this movie's credit, like, you know, I think they made his rage justifiable.
Right. And I also
good, Bill.
And I also think that for me, foul-mouthed kid is usually the first character I disconnect with in the film. And here there was enough nuance to him and his backstory that it kept me interested. Because usually when I see foul-mouthed kid, it's like, I got 5 minutes with this guy and then I'm done. Yeah.
Speaking of foul-mouthed kid, did we get enough Negasonic Teenage Warhead in this film?
No.
Nope.
I think it was enough.
Yeah.
I think it was enough. I don't think it's necessarily a compelling character, but I did adore every time you had, "Hi Wade,
hi Yukio."
I thought it was.
You could have thrown in like 3 more, and I still would have been fine with that.
I thought her character was pretty good in the first movie. I really liked the emergence of her character in the first movie. Here, I thought it was totally wasted and probably shouldn't have been in the movie at all. Like I thought it was really throwaway. And back to the atrocities committed, against the kids at the orphanage. That was just a little over the top mustache twirly for me. That guy, like setting him up as that kind of villain. I just it could have been. I know nuance is not the flag that the hill that this is dying on. So I can understand them being very that was a really pedestrian villain kind of thing, and it was like, oh god, here we go. The abuses at the orphanage, and here's some mustache twirling guy. It could have been a lot more deep rooted emotional rage, but I don't know, whatever people buy, I guess.
What kind of works about that type of abuse in this type of story, and granted it's heightened, it's heightened because this is a heightened world, but like we live in a world right now where, and I'm going to use mutants in comic books are usually seen as a metaphor for race or sexuality or some sort of otherness. So I'm going to use it here. We live in a time where like gay conversion therapy is a thing that has happened, not just in our lifetimes, but like in recent history. And granted, it's not to the same scale, but even if you think back 60, 70 years ago when one of the treatments for homosexuality was removing portions of the brain. These are things that, these are awful. And if you think about that, and if you were to put that in a movie, you'd think like, God, that is so freaking over the top. But these are the atrocities that man does. So in a world that's already heightened, when you got not just like, I like penises instead of vaginas, but I can set things on fire with my mind. I can see there being a heightened level of just like that type of disgusting abuse. Now, Brad, I thought you were going a different place with the joke earlier, and so I'm going to make it now. Speaking of foul-mouthed kids, how did you guys like seeing Bill Skarsgård as the acid-spewing zeitgeist in this? On that team of X-Force that showed up, all of the different like characters that were there for a second. One of the guys was Bill Skarsgård, who is the one that had the thing over his mouth that did the vomit. That's Pennywise from the It movies. So it was just kind of neat seeing him out of makeup, even if it was for as long as this movie gave it to us.
Yeah,
it was amazing.
I also did love the reveal of who the Vanisher was.
Scott had missed that one, so I told him afterwards, "Did you see that?" He's like, "No, who was it?" It's like, you did. Oh my God, yeah, I thought it was so freaking funny.
Yeah,
did I miss it too?
When the Vanisher hits the electrical wire, the invisible one, the invisible.
Yeah, it flashed. Who was it?
Brad Pitt.
Was it Brad Pitt?
They actually cast Brad Pitt in this and had him show up in that role.
Wow. I saw the face and I'm like, do I know that guy? I don't know.
But it was for like 2 frames, and it's like I think that was cool. If you're going to do that type of joke, get a big name to do that particular punchline. Like that's how you do that punchline. And if you're gonna do that particular sequence, they probably picked the right scale of characters to do that with. Believable enough for the comic book fans to be super excited about seeing them, but not so much that you are going to miss them when they're not as big a part of the story as you'd expect them to be.
Yeah. So do they all become X-Force people? When they turn back the clock at the end? Did they?
Well, not all of them. Not all of them were saved, though, right? Like we only saw a couple, right? So are the others still dead?
Yeah.
I think you could, if they showed up in the next one, I think that it would be perfectly understandable. If they didn't, I think it would also be perfect.
Only half of them are dead, Brad. Only half.
And given the fact that you've got, again, like you've got Brad Pitt and Bill Skarsgård, like people who definitely have other things going on right now. I don't know, what does Brad Pitt have going on right now? Maybe he doesn't. But
he's free. Yeah.
Like it probably makes sense that these characters' storylines have probably run their course.
But in terms of the reverse of that, and in terms of setup, I thought it set up an X-Force film really well. Because X-Force, I think, is a device like Guardians, like you had mentioned, Jim, where you could have a storyline with real stakes combined with whatever anarchy Deadpool is throwing into the mix. And I think in the right hands, that X-Force film could be very, very satisfying.
Is that on the table? Has that been talked
with
about?
This cast? It was talked about before Deadpool 2. So I think I wouldn't be surprised if that's the announcement you see of the next step in this.
They've announced both X-Force and Deadpool 3, and part of that is because Ryan Reynolds has said he's more interested in doing X-Force than he is doing a third Deadpool story, and that's the direction that he'd like to take the franchise. And so right now, IMDb has both listed. It's early enough, and they're both listed as announced, but you never.
Yeah, I was surprised because I thought with the Disney Fox merger that everything was off the table for the time being. So
I think this one, these are making enough money and are enough isolated that I think Disney can probably like let these go as long as they're like watching them. Like I think the X-Men movies become a little bit more problematic because they have more broad commercial appeal, which this one is their, their after hours, their rated R. But you do have a good team for it at this point if you do that, because you've got Cable and Domino and you've got Deadpool. It's not the team that we originally thought we would have, but we've got those people. You've probably still got Fire Fist on the table. Maybe some of the kind of the X-Men who are kind of floating in and out might show up. So I mean, I would watch the hell out of that. I would watch the hell out of a story that focused more on those characters. And I think that the hard balance of it is going to be if you base it in the Deadpool universe, which is, I mean, granted part of the X-Men universe, but this is, all of these characters are kind of flowing out of him. If you make a team story that he is not the focus of, but he is still present, how do you rein that character back to let the other people shine? And good writers can do that, don't get me wrong, but it is going to take a nuanced hand, because he's able to be Deadpool of Deadpool 1 and Deadpool 2 because his antics like just suck everything up and everyone else is there for him to bounce off of. So I would be curious how they would actually pull off that X-Force, but I would for sure watch it.
So is Cable going to be part of X-Force, or are we to assume that Deadpool gave him the device back after he fixed time and Cable went back to the future?
We didn't see him give it back.
Yeah, we didn't see him give it back.
No, I know that. I'm just saying, like, Cable sacrificed his ability to go home to his family after saving them, right? By saving Deadpool. But if Negasonic Teenage Warhead was somehow able to repower the device and Deadpool was able to use it to clean up the timeline or whatever, like, I mean, I would assume there's one more jump, Cable can go home.
And now that I'm thinking about it, since we're talking about connections with comic books, as Will had said, Cable's backstory is so convoluted. And spoiler, you've already seen his mother and father in X-Men films. I was really impressed how they sidestepped that. That wasn't, oh wait, because seriously, like X-Men continuity in the comics, you need Wikipedia. You really do. It's impossible to decipher that continuity, and the film somehow fell into that as well. And I thought that was a really streamlined way of introducing the character without all the noise behind him. I was glad to see that.
So
and you also mentioned.
So real quick, I'm sorry, because I think we have listeners who probably have no idea what any of that was about.
Yeah.
So it's been a while since I watched the animated series. Like, Cable is Cyclops' son with some version of Jean Grey. Is that right?
Yes.
Am I? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's clones involved and time travel and body displacement into future body clones. All of that happened in there too. But yes,
they knew that was going to confuse the shit out of you. For this film, you didn't have to worry about it.
No.
Gotcha. Okay.
That's part of why I liked what they did with this Cable, because we were able to see, like, okay, well, let's distill this character down to his core bits and see how he actually works, because that's a version of him that, like, in the comics we never get to see, because he always has this baggage. He always has who I am, who my parents are, and what my legacy is because of that, and the things that happen to me in the future. And here it's just, I'm a future soldier because of this terrible thing that happened, so let's go back in time and fix it.
Yeah.
And the simplified version of Cable, as you guys have explained, it's worked for me. I mean, I think if they'd have brought in a lot of that other stuff, it just would have needlessly complicated it. I just thought he was a really good character and anti-hero in this movie.
Yeah, they definitely went the right way with him in this. What do you guys feel about, because this was the most pronounced we've had of this version of the character, what did you guys think of Bullwinkle, Moose, and Squirrel version of Colossus?
It's hard because
because that was one of those moments in the film where like, all right, this is a bit much. I mean, I'm waiting for him to say strong like a bull.
Yeah,
It's hard because like when I think about Colossus in the movies, I think first of like the X-Men 3 version, which was really bad, like it was really bad. And so the version that we saw in Deadpool and the version we saw here is a remarkably better version of that. I think his character got like in the first one, it was nice to have him as sort of the straight man that Wade is supposed to bounce off of. Here, I think he got a little too into the antics for my taste, which I mean, I guess his character growth, he's learned from Deadpool as much as Deadpool's learned from him, whatever. But at the same time, like, this is a pretty large character in terms of like the comic books, and he doesn't like pants people. That's not a thing that he like. That is not fitting in his personality. Whether or not we like the outcome of that pantsing or not, it just felt weird coming specifically from him, specifically in this movie, specifically the way it happened.
Yeah, because toward the end of the movie, you had Cable kind of taking that role as his straight, quote unquote, straight man, right? To kind of play it straight when they were kind of on the same track. So. To have two of them kind of fulfilling the same role, I don't think it would work. So they tried to do something different. It didn't really work for me. Again, I guess they had to have him. Felt they had to have him in there, but it was just another character that I thought maybe I didn't need to see there at the end. But maybe for fan reasons, he had to be in there.
It was also fun hearing him say "fuck" though.
Yeah.
Yes. Definitely. Yeah. I mean, the little kid in me was like, "Oh my God, Colossus!"
12-year-old.
You could have cut those characters entirely after Act 2, like Colossus and Negasonic and all of them. Like, they were good for the I'm trying out to be an X-Men. Hey, this doesn't work. But when you bring them back around to the end, it's really just for the action set piece stuff, which I think you probably could have just had Deadpool, Domino, and Cable doing there at the end, and had. Probably a tighter story as a result.
All right. Well, I know we had some issues with the film to some degree, but overall, I think we all liked it. We all enjoyed it. Yeah. It was definitely more Deadpoolier, but it worked. Any other final thoughts before we move on to some plugs, guys?
Just Jordan says in chat they had Dolly Parton at the beginning of the movie, which is awesome. And yeah, I liked that song used in the the 9 to 5 used in the montage of just
and something I didn't mention that I enjoyed. I did enjoy the action sequence with the bus. The prisoner vehicle. I thought that was really well done.
Yeah,
particularly with Domino's bits.
Yes.
I want a Domino movie, guys. Like, it needs to be a thing.
Yep. I want that so bad.
Can they please call it Black Widow?
That would be excellent.
Only if we're lucky, Will and Bill. Only if we're lucky.
That was a pretty good joke in the movie.
Yeah.
And I applaud them for being able to go there. I thought it was great.
All right. Well, guys, we're going to stick a fork in Deadpool 2's Chimichanga and move on to some plugs. Bill, I would love for you to tell our listeners who have been drooling over your hotness for the last hour and 15 minutes where they can find you on your show. And then if you have anything, movie-wise, you think listeners should check out, feel free to let them know. But where can folks find the Comic Book Bears podcast?
They can find it on Facebook as Comic Book Bears Podcast. You can find us on the Twitter and the Tumblr and the Instagram as Comic Book Bears. The Facebook is probably the best point of contact. If you want to email us, you can do so at comicbookbears@gmail.com. We tend to get about 2 episodes out a month. Like you gentlemen, we're all in different areas of the country, and this year especially, it's been hard to coordinate getting all 3 of us together. But that's something that goes in waves. And we're not a video podcast; we're an audio podcast. So if you like what you hear.
No shirts off.
With the we might have the shirts off. You just can never tell.
Hands off,
and you don't mind. You don't mind hearing my my Jersey accent. Just
we love your Jersey accent, Bill. Just saying.
Okay. I pride myself in, having a decent radio voice, but every once in a while, chocolate or dog comes out. And, so my plug, is it okay if I plug something that isn't a movie?
I guess.
Not a problem.
Yeah, okay. We've done that before.
Okay, last Thursday, I went to see the British band Editors in concert in Philadelphia. It's been a few years since they've played the States. They're touring behind their sixth album, which is freaking me out, called Violence. And if people are unfamiliar with how they sound, if you have affinity for acts from the late 70s and the early 80s, like Joy Division or Echo and the Bunnymen, it certainly is within that wheelhouse. And though some of the songs work much better live than on record, it's still a strong record, and the album is called Violence. It's their sixth album, and apart from the Janelle Monáe album this year, this is the one I've been playing the most, so that's my plug.
Editors. They came up with a really exciting name for their band.
It's not the Editors. It's not the Editors. That's very important. But if you're completely unfamiliar with the band, go to their debut album, which is called The Back Room, which is one of
I'm interested.
Yep. So give them a shot.
Oh goodness. All right. Well, Bill, thanks so much. We'll be sure to get some links to your show in our show notes as well. So if you're listening on digital tape delay, and you want to find Comic Book Bears podcast, feel free. Grab those links, check them on out. Will, how about you? What have you got this week for plugs?
So this is a movie that should be hitting theaters. It's rolling out in a weird limited release. So if not this weekend, in the next couple of weekends, in your local cinema, it's the new John Cameron Mitchell movie. He's the guy that did Hedwig and the Angry Inch. Movie is called How to Talk to Girls at Parties, and it is really, really freaking cool. Not perfect. It's another film just like the one we just talked about, with some sort of some narrative flaws, but just the cool factor overcomes that. It's these kids. They're like punk kids, and I mean punk kids, like set in like London in the 80s, going to like punk shows and shit. They run across this house where there are these aliens who are touring the galaxy. The main one is played by Elle Fanning, who I absolutely adore. She's just one of the best people out there right now. And she decides that she wants to break away from this house on this tour and just spend 48 hours hanging out with one of the punk kids and just learning what is the punk and where can I find the punk. So they go around different shows and he teaches her a bunch of things. She learns some stuff from him, and it's a sweet little love story set against intergalactic love stories backed by like cool punk music. Neil Gaiman wrote the short story that this was adapted from. I've been listening. Like, it's not Janelle Monáe, but the soundtrack to this has been pretty cool as well. So it's like it's been sort of a B-side for me this last week. You also get to see Nicole Kidman playing like kind of a washed up punk in this, and that's kind of cool to watch. Just like someone who's playing one of those like my better days are behind me, so fuck it type punks. I love it. It's called How to Talk to Girls at Parties. I don't think it's going to go over very well critically, because it does have some narrative issues, but it's really freaking cool, and it hit my sweet spot. So you should check it out.
Yeah, well, I had seen the trailer quite a while ago for this one, and it piqued my interest. It's on my list of movies to try to see this year, and it did disappoint me a little bit when I started to see some reviews leak out. But I don't knock movies off my list for that. I still go see them and make my and try to enjoy them on their face value. But I love that 80s punk, new age kind of vibe. And as you said, Elle Fanning, right? You said in this one?
Yeah. Elle Fanning.
She's really good.
Indeed. All right, babe. How about you? What have you got?
From the 80s to 1950, And even further, actually, this goes back to like feudal Japan. I went back and finally caught up with a classic that I'm ashamed to admit that I hadn't seen before now, Akira Kurosawa's Rashomon. I caught this one, downloaded this one on a plane. People have always talked about it as being a very seminal and very influential film. I loved it. It was great. It's a really kind of I guess you could say a three-hander in a way, kind of. It's what it's about. It's about this incident that happens between this man and wife and a stranger in the woods. And the movie is told from each of the main characters' perspective about, incidents that happened and and it's very interesting drama. It's, of course, when you think about those kind of movies, that samurai kind of feudal Japan stuff, the drama it's really melodrama. Like it's heavy melodrama, especially in the acting. It's very, very earnest and kind of, you might say, over the top stuff that would probably never work today. But I really enjoyed this movie. Check it out. I rented it on iTunes for like $3 or $4. It's Rashomon by Akira Kurosawa in 1950. Check it out. This is a film that basically stands on its own, and it's worth seeing.
All right. Yeah, I saw you watching that movie, Jim, because I was sitting next to you on the plane, and I think I had taken off the headset, the VR headset I was watching my movie on, and I saw you watching that. And at first I was like, is that like that fake samurai TV show thing we saw in the documentary?
From Fantastic Fest, yeah.
Yeah.
Top Knot Detective.
Yeah. I was like, oh my God, wait, what? And then you told me what it was. And I was like, oh, okay. But it looked awesome. It reminded me so much of like an old like spaghetti Western, but just with swords and the sword fights, you might, American sword fights and stuff, they're very stylized, very heavily choreographed with pre-planned moves and stuff. The fights in this movie between, having guys having sword fights or whatever, or it's more like hand to hand, like really stripped down, like man on man. And you know what I'm talking about. Like, just like raw, like violence toward each other. And if, you have guys, they're not just pummeling on each other, but like one guy's trying to run away and the other guy trips and he can't catch him. So the other guy jumps on him. It's like it's like street fighting almost. And it was amazing to see them do that back then. Yeah. Very awesome. Well, for me this week, I have some listeners I want to plug. I mean, I want to plug some listeners. I mean, so we got some photo submissions while we were podcasting away, and I want to show those. Oh, real quick, Jim, Sammy W, who by the way,
be here.
Congratulations, Sam and Steve, on your wedding. Sam says, man on man, those sword fights. I've been there. So there you go, Jim.
Yes,
you're not alone. I got some photos to share with you guys that were submitted during the show. One of those is very swanky. Check it out, guys. This is Steve from Sacramento Movie.
I was going to say that I know those feet. That's Steve Bubba. That is Steve Bubba. I knew it.
He's enjoying the podcast. Looks like his feet up while he's enjoying your handsome mug on his giant TV, Bill. So, it's a good way to pass an evening, perhaps.
My three sons. Right, Bill?
Right.
Oh boy. And then next up, we got another one from a new listener of the show. This gentleman missed the boat, sadly, last week on our Bears of Summer show. But guys, say hello to Michael from San Diego.
Hey, Michael. Hey, Michael from San Diego.
Yeah.
Will, what are we looking at?
We are looking at a looks like kind of a mirror selfie,
Mirror selfie.
With the shirt pulled up in what I absolutely adore, just sort of like the pulled up and over the neck, but still on the sleeves still on. Delightfully hairy chest. Bill's giving us a thank you, Bill.
Had to oblige.
So Bill, here's the thing though, you got to stand up a little bit so that we can get the full effects.
Yeah. Okay.
There we go.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
I think you just made a ton of people really happy. Well,
happy
Michael,
all over. I'm glad all over.
Michael, thank you so much for this very, very hot picture. Very nice. And guys, last picture. We've been hearing from him today in the live chat. He wanted to make sure to get his summer funner picture in. Guys, this is Jordan from the live chat. Hey, Jordan.
Hey, Jordan.
Hey, Jordan.
Hi there, Jordan.
Jim, what are we looking at here?
Blow it up a little. Can you blow it up a little? Like this is a picture I think I've seen before.
There you
go. Jordan looking great in his, I don't know, those camo shorts. Totally shirtless. He's got a nice little patch of hair there and a nice smile. So yeah, that's the Jordan we know and love.
He's got the kind of head you just want to like tussle the hair.
Right?
Oh, yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Bill, I'm pretty sure he'd let you tussle his hair.
Okay.
I can't remember the
God,
time
I so needed this ego boost. Thank you so much.
It's what we do on the Movie Bears podcast. Well, it's been a fun show. Bill, thanks so much for joining us this week. It's always a treat. I know we keep saying like we need to have you back for a movie that's not a comic book film.
Yes.
Well, we need to just pick one and do it, I think. But Bill, we always love it when you can join us. So thank you so much for being here. And looks like we may have lost Bill. Oh no.
I mean, I guess at least now instead of in the middle of the show, it's still like Bill's with us, Bill.
Well, maybe he'll reconnect in a second, but if not, we love that guy to death. Real quick, Jim, where can people find you online if they want to talk movies between now and our next show?
Please find me on Twitter at JJPOUTWEST. JJP out west. That's me on Twitter. Find me at Jim Pugliafico. That's my real name on Facebook also. All
right. Awesome. And Will, if people want to chat with...
I'm back.
Hey, Bill's back.
Yay. Oh, woo. I'm sorry. If you guys can tell, two beds, one for the sleep and one for the freak. I'm in a hotel room right now, so
yeah.
I basically live in hotel rooms Monday through Wednesday nights, and part of the downfall of that, part of the pitfalls of that is hotel internet. So sorry about that, folks.
So, Bill, your freak bed is right in prime camera frame spot. I'm noticing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Maybe we need a camera set up on that later. Anyway. Hey, so Bill, I know you already mentioned how people can find the Comic Book Bears podcast.
Yeah.
But if people want to chat movies with you or comics with you between now and your next show, where can they find you personally online if you want to share that?
I basically live on Facebook, so just look for Bill Zanowitz and just send a message saying you saw me on Movie Bears or whatever. And I'll be happy to friend and talk to you.
Nice.
Actually, it was like last week's show. When you were talking about the films of summer, and Will and I got into a discussion about a almost secret love of mine, which is the 1960s beach party films. And I was real glad I avoided that rabbit hole when I got home from work, because that would have swallowed up my entire weekend. But yeah, I'm very happy to talk movies as well.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, guys, find Bill on Facebook. Will, how about you?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at Whatever Cove. I don't post there a lot. I'm on Facebook. I'm watching Will. I'm I'm on Facebook. I'm William Lindis there, and I post there quite a bit, probably too much. I also post on Letterboxd, where I do reviews of every film that I watch, which is a lot. So look for me there. Just search for William Lindis. Give me a follow. I'll follow you back.
All right, awesome. And you can find me on Facebook. Just search for Brad Harris. There's a slew of new Brad Harrises I've never seen before on Facebook lately. I'm the one with the Bear and Chub friends probably in common with you. So feel free, reach out with a message first, if you please, just so I know who you are. And I'm kind of using Twitter a little bit. You can find me there at iBradPro. Want to give a big thank you to everyone who joined us this week in the live chat. Sammy W, Jordan, Billy. This is the Romper Stomper Bomper Boom moment where we read everyone's name. Jurassic Mark, which, by the way, I think is a brilliant screen name. Chris Lopez, everyone else who was here. It was good to see you guys. And for all of you out there in digital tape delay listener land, we love you too. Thank you as always for supporting the show. We do this because it's fun for us to chat movies, but it's great to chat movies with you. So thanks for being here, guys. That's it for us this week. We'll figure out what's coming next week. We'll get to it. We'll see y'all then. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.